أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. If I can ask everyone to come closer, inshallah. This is now the 10th lesson of the Tafsīr of Sūrah Al-Baqarah. Inshallah, we'll begin by looking at verse 25 first, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أَنَّ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ كُلَّمَا رُزِقُوا مِنْهَا مِنْ ثَمَرَةٍ رِزْقًا قَالُوا هَذَا الَّذِي رُزِقْنَا مِنْ قَبْلُ وَأُتُوا بِهِ مُتَشَابِهًا وَلَهُمْ فِيهَا أَزْوَاجٌ مُطَهَّرَةٌ وَهُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. So give glad tidings, or give to those who believe and do good deed and do good, the news that they will have gardens graced with flowing rivers and streams. Whenever they are given sustenance from the fruits of these gardens, they will say, "We have been given this before," because they were provided with something like it. They will have pure spouses, and there they will stay forever. This commandment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of giving glad tidings to the believers comes after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warning those who are incapable of, or those who are not able to meet the challenge of the Quran, which is to produce something like the Quran, to produce a surah like the Quran. So as we know, in the last lesson we looked at, the last two lessons we looked at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first nida that He gave to mankind, the first calling, Ya ayyuhan nas u'budu rabbakum, O mankind, worship your Lord. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned His rububiyyah, His lordship over creation, and how as a result of that mankind should worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so He establishes the proof upon mankind, and after that He challenged mankind to produce something like the Quran, because if you remember, we made the connection between these two topics towards the beginning of Al-Baqarah, and we said how in the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls to mankind, Ya ayyuhan nas u'budu rabbakum, Allah established His rububiyyah, His lordship. After establishing His rububiyyah, He wanted to establish the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So as we mentioned, after you come to the belief that there is a Rabb, a Lord, someone who created you and nurtured you, you need to come to the conclusion of what His message is. And the only way that you can know that is through prophethood, is through revelation. And so this is why the ulama, they said this ayah, وَإِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِمَّا نَزَّلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبَدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِثْلِهِ, that if you're in doubt concerning this revelation that we have sent down to our Prophet, then produce a surah like unto it. فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَلَن تَفْعَلُوا, but if you're not capable of doing that, and you will not be capable of doing that, then be wary of this fire and protect yourself from this fire, in which is fuel is men and stones, which has been prepared for those who disbelieve. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after making clear the consequences of those who choose to disbelieve, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then speaks about those who choose to believe and do good deeds. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. So give those who believe and do good the news that they will have gardens graced with flowing streams. So just to make it clear, the context of this verse, Ibn Kathir, he mentions in his Tafsīr that after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentioned what is in store for those who disbelieve, he mentioned the state of his awliya. He mentioned the state of his awliya, those who believe in him and those who follow the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, those who believed and do righteous deeds. And then he mentioned an interesting point. Ibn Kathir, he said, وَهَذَا مَعْنَى تَسْمِيَةِ الْقُرْآنِ مَثَانِي. That this is the reason why the Qur'an is called Mathani. As Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he called Surah Al-Fatiha Saba' al-Mathani wal-Qur'an al-Azim. Saba' al-Mathani. So one of the descriptions of the Qur'an and of Surah Al-Fatiha is that is Mathani. And Mathani has been translated in many different ways or interpreted in many different ways. This is probably not the time to discuss the details of what Mathani, the different interpretations are, but we'll just go for what Ibn Kathir mentions here, and that Mathani here, he says, على أصح أقوال العلماء, according to the stronger view of the scholars, it is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Iman, He usually follows it up with mentioning kufr, أو عكسه, or the opposite. Because the word Mathani is related to the word Ithnain in Arabic, which is two. And so things are doubled up or mentioned together. And so this is one of the features of the Qur'an, that whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions kufr, He mentions soon after it or before it Iman, faith. Whenever He mentions the ashqiya, those who live a miserable life, He usually mentions the su'ada, those who live a happy life, etc. Now, there's something important that we can learn from this Quranic method of interacting and dealing with and speaking to mankind, which is the lesson that we learn from this is the importance of striking a balance between targhib and tarhib, putting fear in people's hearts and at the same time giving them a sense of hope. And that's one of the unique features of the Qur'an and its ability to balance between the two. Between giving people hope at the same time putting fear in people's hearts. And we've seen over time in history how people when they didn't achieve this balance, it led to deviation in their approach to the religion. So those who focus too much on fear, on the fear aspect of the religion, fear of the punishment of Allah or the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in many cases led to people despairing from the mercy of Allah. And so as a result, they took a very rigid approach to the religion. Because they feared that anything wrong that they do, that's it, they'll be condemned. And then you have the other extreme who focus just on the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the love of God. And as a result, they began to lose that reverence for the commandments of God. And everything was done in the name of the spirit of the religion. And so this phenomenon of going to these extremes existed amongst other Abrahamic faiths, but also within the religion as well. So the Christians, maybe we can say, they're the ones who went to the extreme of focusing on the aspect of love and mercy, and the Jews went to the other extreme where they followed the text so literally that they lost the spirit of the text, and as a result, and they focused on the aspects of the Qur'an that, or their revelation that focused on sin and transgression. And likewise, within the religion, within Islam, we find this extreme as well amongst the Khawarij, who declared that anyone committed a sin, that's it, he'll be in the hellfire forever. And by the way, that's not the distinguishing feature of the Khawarij. There were sects within the Khawarij that didn't believe that if you committed a major sin, you won't go to hellfire for eternity. So they were characterized by other things. There are other common denominators amongst the subsects in the Khawarij. And then you had the other extreme, maybe you can say to a certain degree amongst the extreme Sufis as well. They went to the other extreme. And so as a result, they were very lax in regards to the adherence to a lot of the principles of the Sharia. But the Quran strikes that balance perfectly well of mentioning punishment and reward. And we need to be able to implement this approach in all aspects of our lives, and the way we give da'wah and tarbiyah to our family members, our children, in our communities. Because if we just keep, for example, if we're at the minbar and we're giving khutbahs every week and just saying, all the things that we do is haram, and if we continue doing, we'll be condemned to the hellfire. If we took this approach, what would happen? People would just lose hope. Everything will be just doom and gloom. But at the same time, if we just say, no, the mercy of Allah is so extensive, subhanallah, that, people think, okay, if that's the case, then alhamdulillah, I'm actually doing all right. I don't have to worry about myself. Likewise with children as well, you just take the same approach. So that's a unique feature of the Quran, in its ability to do that. And we will see that inshallah later on in more detail. Now, وَبَشِّرْ. So let's just analyze the verse now, word for word. وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Give glad tidings. Give this good news. Imam al-Qurtubi, he says that tabshir, or this act of giving glad tidings, it is essentially to inform someone of something in which it will have an effect on their bashara. And bashara in the Arabic language, it's used to refer to the skin of a human being. So here we're looking at it from a purely linguistic perspective. As you know, one of the names of man is what? Bashar. And that's because he has skin. In Arabic we call it bashara. Bashara. So they say at-tabshir al-ikhbar bima yadhharu atharuhu ala al-bashara. Tabshir, this act of giving glad tidings, is when you inform someone of something to the extent that it will influence and have an effect on their skin. Why? Because, as you know, sometimes when you inform someone of good news, they become really happy, and you see it on their face, isn't it? Sometimes when they become really sad upon hearing some news, you can see that on their face. You can see it on the face. Like they used to describe the Prophet ﷺ, like they would know when the Prophet ﷺ became upset by the color of his skin. When his skin would become red, because he was quite light-skinned, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So a sudden change of emotion would become apparent on his skin. So tabshir is not. It's the act of giving someone a piece of news that really emotionally impacts the person. So you're not just giving a piece of information. So giving a piece of information would be i'lam or i'lan. You're just informing someone of something. That informing might not influence the person, because you're just taking it in. You're taking information. Tabshir, though, you're informing them to such an extent that it influences their emotions. It impacts their emotions. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to inform the believers, but in a way that it will influence them in a positive way, such that their skins, the influence of it will become apparent on their skins. And that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described the believers in other places in the Quran. تَقْشَعِرُّ مِنْهُ جُلُودُ الَّذِينَ يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُمْ. That their skins, they shiver upon hearing the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ثُمَّ تَلِينُ جُلُودُهُمْ وَقُلُوبُهُمْ إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. But then their hearts and their skins soften to the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yani that was the impact revelation had on the Sahaba and the believers. And then Al-Qurtubi, he says, ثُمَّ الْغَالِبْ أَنْ يُسْتَعْمَلْ فِي السُّرُورِ. And so this word tabshir, or giving information such that it influences the emotions of a person, is predominantly used when giving good news. And then he goes on to say that sometimes it can be used to when giving bad news to someone as well. As Allah says in the Quran, فَبَشِّرْهُمْ بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. So give them the tidings of a painful punishment. So here it's not just a matter of what informing, it's more than that, but it's a matter of informing them to the degree that it will influence their emotions. So this is a role of the Prophet ﷺ, to give tabshir. We learn from this, therefore, that the believer should also be a person who gives tabshir, who also gives glad tidings to others. Meaning that we are able to inform Muslims of the reward for what is in store for the believers in the Day of Judgment, in the afterlife, in that influential way, such that it has an impact on their skins. So we have to look to ourselves and ask ourselves, are we of that type? Do we give glad tidings to the believers on an individual basis, on a family basis, on a community level? That's how we have to look at it. Because as Muslims, especially those in position of authority, they must be able to guide the Muslims in their struggle to adhere to the religion and make sure that they're on track, but also to give them that hope, that they will eventually enter into Jannah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from amongst its people. At the same time, though, on the receiving end, let's look at it from the receiving end. Allah is commanding the Prophet ﷺ to give tabshir. So we have to receive this glad tidings. So it's not just a one-way process here. It's a two-way matter here that we have. The act of giving the glad tidings, but also receiving. Istabshara. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to the believers in the Quran, yastabshiruna, that they receive this glad tidings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, do we receive glad tidings well? Because Allah gives glad tidings to the believers. But do we take those glad tidings into our heart and allow those the promises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to influence our behavior and our attitude? That's an important question we have to ask ourselves. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Give glad tidings to those who believe, and not just to those who believe, but those who believe and do good deeds. And so we see this distinction between belief and action. And this is a point we've discussed before. Does that indicate, therefore, that iman and a'mal are separate from one another? We said no, not necessarily. Because iman implies that a person will do good deeds. So if وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, give glad tidings to those who believe, that implies that they will do good deeds as well. Because a person who has iman will naturally do a'mal. So why is a'mal being singled out here? We said in order to emphasize the importance of good deeds. Because it's not possible that a person will just enter into paradise purely based on his internal belief. That internal belief has to be accompanied by good deeds, and that's something we've spoken about on a number of occasions. And that's why one of the scholars, they mentioned that that in this ayah it's a proof that happiness in the hereafter can only be achieved by both the internal faith and as well as good deeds. So this refutes the Murji'ah, who basically said that the internal belief is sufficient for a person to enter into paradise. So وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أَنَّ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ. That to them, lahum, they will have jannat. They will have gardens. Now the word jannat is, as we know, is a plural of Jannah. And Jannah, as the scholars would define it, is a bustan or a garden. If you look to the etymology and the word Jannah linguistically, we discover quite a lot actually. Now, the word Jannah, as you can see, it's comprised of the letters Jim, Nun, and Nun, and the ta marbuta at the end. Now, generally speaking, most Arabic words they emanate from this trilateral root system, 3 letters. Yeah, so Islam is from Salima, Kitab is from Kataba, Julus is from Jalasa. Yeah, from 3 letters. Jannah, and all these 3 letters generally convey a particular meaning. Jim, Nun, Nun gives the meaning of being hidden. Conveys the meaning of being hidden. And so as a result of that, those 3 letters, we derive a number of words like jinn. You can see why jinn is called jinn, because they're hidden from the eyesight or from the sight of man. Janeen is the fetus or embryo because it's hidden in the mother's womb. Junna is a shield, because when you have a shield in front of you, it protects you and hides you from your enemy. Okay? And Jannah. Why? Because when you enter into Jannah, you'll be surrounded by so many trees that you'll be hidden within your home in paradise. So this is Jannah. Now, in terms of the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has described this paradise, or these gardens in the plural, وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أَنَّ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ. تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ. Here, according to the translation of Professor Abdul Halim, he's translated it as graced with flowing streams or flowing rivers, maybe we can say. تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ. By the way, just a common mistake that many people make when they recite this ayah and similar ayat, they pause on a place in the ayah which can change the meaning. Okay, so for example, many people say, وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أَنَّ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ. Okay, if a person was to say that, it changes the meaning. How does it change the meaning? If you pause on tajri, it will mean, and give glad tidings to those who believe and do righteous deeds, that they will have flowing gardens. Yeah, so it's not the gardens that are flowing, it's the anhar that are flowing. So you really shouldn't stop on tajri. And there are many verses like this in the Quran. So if you run out of breath, just make sure that you have enough breath to carry on a bit more, okay, after that. Okay, so if you want to stop at anhar, that's fine. وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أَنَّ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ. There you go, my voice ran out there. Okay, but prepare yourself. That's why in many ayat, it's always good that where you know where the meaning might change, prepare yourselves by taking in a deep breath, which is what I should have done when I recited that. Okay. Okay. So tajri min tahtiha. Now the question is here: why is paradise being described like this in relation to its the flowing rivers? Out of all things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have spoken about the soil or the earth, for example, or the canopy of paradise, or the sky of paradise, etc. Many things. Imam At-Tabari, rahimahullah, he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He focused on the trees of paradise and the fruits of paradise. Because obviously one of the Jannat means, as we said, many trees, isn't it? Yeah, it's a bustan, and a bustan is a place, an orchard which has many, many trees. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned rivers. So when you have rivers alongside trees, water and trees, it leads to what? Fruits, isn't it? Yeah, fruits, which is the thamara, or which is you could say the result of having trees and water together. So he mentions here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't spoken about the ard, the earth of paradise here. لأنه معلوم أنه إنما أراد جل ثناء الخبر عن ماء أنهارها أنه جار تحت أشجارها وغروسها وثمارها لا أنه جار تحت أرضها. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to make it clear that these rivers, they flow underneath the trees themselves, and they do not flow underneath the earth. They do not flow underneath the earth. Okay, now if you look at the way many of our plants are irrigated, okay, is the water that lies underneath the earth. But in paradise, these rivers, they will not flow underneath the ground itself, but rather underneath the trees. And these rivers will flow without any banks as well, as the Prophet ﷺ described them, that they won't have any banks. And they will flow in the direction that the person in paradise wants it to flow in. So it can change direction according to, the will of the person in Jannah. And there are different types of rivers. There's a river of water, river of honey, river of wine as well. Okay? And these different rivers fulfill a number of different purposes, but we will look at that point later, inshallah. So, تجري من تحتها الأنهار. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions كلما رزقوا منها من ثمرات رزقا قالوا, that whenever they are given sustenance from the fruits of these gardens, they will say, we have been given this before. Now, just before we explain this, just keep in mind the order, okay, the order of the things that are paradise is described with. First, okay, so we can see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first thing that He describes about the paradise are the trees and the rivers. Okay, now we're moving on to another aspect. كلما رزقوا منها من ثمرة, that when they are provided sustenance from it, i.e. from the gardens, that they will say, we have been given this before. Okay, we have been given this before. Now, when they are given these provisions, so this shows you that they will be given provisions whenever they want, and that's one of the unique features about the provisions in Jannah. The provisions in this dunya, we have to go to them. We have to seek them. But the provisions, this is in the dunya. The provisions in Jannah though, they come to us. We don't go to the provisions, they come to us. To the extent that the Prophet ﷺ said, when a person sees, a bird flying in Jannah, and he will like the look of it, and he will say, I want that one, and he'll come down immediately, cooked, ready for him to eat. Okay? Whenever you see the fruits of paradise, you don't have to climb up the tree in order to get it. It will lower itself down for you to pick. Okay? No effort is required. No effort is required. And you don't have to go in search of it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, every time that they are provided, they will say, هَذَا الَّذِي رُزِقُنَا مِنْ قَبْلِ. They will say, we had something similar to this. We were provided with this in before. Now, we'll discuss what does it mean before later. But just an important point that we can derive from this is that we see from the characteristics of the people of Jannah is that they are quick to attribute good to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they said, هَذَا الَّذِي رُزِقُنَا. This was something that we were provided with before. Now when you say that, that's different to saying this is something that we ate before or something that we had before. But the fact that they say, هَذَا الَّذِي رُزِقُنَا, we have been provided with this before, meaning someone has been giving it to us, which is obviously in reference to who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise, when they enter into paradise, what will they say? وَقَالُوا الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الَّذِي هَدَانَا لِهَذَا. The first thing they would say, all praises due to Allah who guided us to this. وقالوا الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. And we would not have been guided to this had Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not guided us to it. So they're very quick to attribute good to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And another ayah that mentions وَقَالُوا الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الَّذِي أَذْهَبَ عَنَّا الْحَزَنَ. All praise is due to Allah when they enter into paradise. All praise is due to Allah, the one who removed from us all grief. And so subhanAllah, this is, as the scholars they mention, one of the highest forms of remembrance of Allah. The highest forms of dhikr. It's not just saying, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. That's a very high form of dhikr. One of the highest forms of dhikr is when a person remembers Allah in all of his circumstances. Not just in a generic manner, but he relates everything around him to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because when you're in salah, you finish your salah, you make tasbih, and this is quite generic. But when a person reaches the level where whatever he faces in life, he remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's best with a child. The first thing he does, he remembers Allah. Allah is Al-Wahhab. He's a provider, bestower of grace and blessings. Whenever he receives an increase in wealth or he receives his income, he remembers the Razzaq. Allah is the bestower of provisions. And he explicitly mentions that. He says, Alhamdulillah, Allah has provided this for us. Whatever in life, he just remembers Allah and he associates Allah to that khair and that good. That's from the characteristics of the people of Jannah. And that's one of the highest forms of dhikr and remembrance. And we should try to achieve this level. It's a hard level. It's not easy. It's not easy. Especially when people struggle just to make the generic remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To make this high level of remembrance, it requires a lot of effort. Now this phrase, هَذَا الَّذِي رُزِقُنَا مِن قَبْلِ. Let's discuss this phrase in more detail. We were provided with this before. Now, many scholars of the view, and we'll say that this is probably the opinion of maybe the majority and an opinion which most scholars believe to be sound, the more sound opinion, that before here, the word before, min qabl, refers to the dunya. Meaning when they receive the fruits in paradise, the provisions in paradise, they will say, we were given similar to this in the dunya. In the dunya. Okay? And there's a number of fawaid that we can learn from this, inshallah. But let us just mention the other opinion for now. The other opinion says, no, as Imam al-Tabari says, وَقَالَ آخَرُونَ بَلْ تَأْوِيلُ ذَلِكَ هَذَا الَّذِي رُزِقْنَا مِنْ ثِمَارِ الْجَنَّةِ مِنْ قَبْلِ هَذَا. Meaning that this is what we received before. Meaning that they would continuously receive provisions in paradise. So later on, when they receive more provisions, they will say, this is similar to what we had before in Jannah. So min qabl refers to, according to another interpretation, within paradise. Now, why would they say such a thing? Why would they say such a thing if we go for the second view? Many scholars said it's because that when they take the fruits in paradise, the fruits will grow immediately. It will not take a whole season to grow. So when they see it again, they say, wow, this is just like what we just had. So it will replenish itself automatically. So that's the view of some scholars. Now, Imam al-Tabari, though, he held the view strongly that no, min qabl before actually refers to the dunya. Because the ayah says, كُلَّمَا رُزِقُوا مِنْهَا, that every time that they are given provisions, and every time will include the first time. Isn't it? Every time will include the first time. So the first time they receive their provisions in paradise, they will say, we were given similar to this before. Which will definitely mean that before means what? The dunya. Okay? Okay. Now, in support of the other view, which is that before here refers to the things that they ate before in paradise, there is a narration of Yahya ibn Abi Kathir. He said that what the inhabitants of paradise will be given like a tray to eat from, and then another tray to eat from after that. But they will say, oh, we were given this before, something like this before. But then the angel will say, Kul فَاللَّوْنُ وَاحِدْ وَالطَّعْمُ مُخْتَلِفٌ. The angel will say to them, eat this, it looks the same, the color is the same, but it will taste different. Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will continuously change the taste of the fruits in paradise. Okay, and that's the interpretation of many scholars. And so for them, it will look the same, but it will taste completely different. Now what's the benefit behind that? As you know, a lot of the times we like fruits, certain fruits. I'm sure we've all go through phases where we like having a particular fruit, but when we keep on having it, what will happen? We get bored of it, isn't it? Maybe we'll try something else. And so in the dunya, for example, the taste that we have in terms of our fruits are very limited. But in paradise, the taste will be unlimited. Imagine that, subhanAllah. Unlimited taste. Unlimited variety of different tastes that you will enjoy and keep on enjoying. It will look the same, but it will taste very, very different. Now, وَأُتُوا بِهِ مُتَشَابِهًا. And then, now according to the translation of Abdul Halim, Professor Abdul Halim, he says, وَأُتُوا بِهِ مُتَشَابِهًا means because they were provided with something like it. So he is basically saying that this is explaining why they said that. هَذَا الَّذِي رُزِقُنَا مِنْ قَبْلِ. This is something that we received before. Why? وَأُتُوا بِهِ مُتَشَابِهًا, because they were provided with something like it. This is one understanding, and not the particular maybe understanding that we would maybe give preference to here. This is in reality a confirmation of what the people of Jannah were thinking. So the people of Jannah are thinking, whoa, we were given something similar to this. And Allah says, وَأُتُوا بِهِ مُتَشَابِهًا. And that is actually because they were given something similar to it, but in reality, mutashabih, it resembles it, but when you say it resembles it, that implies that there is what? A difference. So this is why Ar-Razi, he posed the question in his tafsir, it's like, what is the position of this phrase within this whole sentence? He says, أن الله تعالى لما حكى عن أهل الجنة ادعاء تشابه الأرزاق في قوله قالوا هذا الذي رزقنا من قبل فالله تعالى صدقهم في تلك الدعوة بقوله وأتوا به متشابها. That when the people of Jannah, when Allah narrates what the people of Jannah will say in terms of that these fruits and these fruits of paradise, they resemble one another, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is verifying what their thoughts are. That yes, these fruits did resemble it, but they are somewhat different. Now, so they will resemble, according to the stronger view, as we said, they will resemble the fruits of paradise. They will resemble the fruits in this dunya. How will they resemble the fruits in this dunya? There are a number of views. Many scholars said that they will resemble the way they look, as we mentioned, but the taste will be different. Other scholars, they said that they will resemble the fruits just in names, but their realities will be different. Okay, they will resemble the fruits in names, but their realities will be different. So a pomegranate will be known as a pomegranate in paradise. A rumman will be known as a rumman in paradise. But the reality of them will be very, very different. So when they receive what they know to be a rumman, they will say, okay, we were given rumman in the dunya, pomegranates, but it's very different. And that's why there's an athar, a narration of Ibn Abbas that says, لا يشبه شيء مما في الجنة ما في الدنيا إلا الأسماء. There is nothing that you find in Jannah and its equivalent in this dunya, except that the only thing that you find there which is similar or which links them together is just the names. But the reality is far from one. The reality is completely different from the fruits of paradise to the fruits in this dunya. So we can say perhaps the fruits in paradise, according to one interpretation, how Allah speaks about them, they are an approximation, okay, of what we have experienced in this dunya. Meaning, so the reality will be completely different, but the closest we can get to them, for example, a pomegranate in paradise will be, a pomegranate in this worldly life. But at-Tabari, he says the stronger view is that they will that they will resemble the appearance of the fruits in the dunya, so they will actually look the same. They will look very similar, but they will taste completely different. But there will also be other differences as well. The fact that, for example, the fruits in this dunya, they go off, isn't it? Whereas the fruits in paradise will not go off. Now here is an important question. What's the significance of saying this? Of actually quoting the people of paradise here? And quoting them in this aspect? That they, that the people of paradise are marveling at the fact that this fruit resembles some of the fruit we had in this life. What does that mean to you? Al-Razi, he mentions some really interesting points. He says, Al-insanu bil-ma'luf anasu wa ila al-ma'hudi amyalu. He says that human being finds more comfort in what they're used to and what they're more accustomed to. فَإِذَا رَأَى مَا لَمْ يَأْلَفْهُ نَفَرَ عَنْهُ طَبْعُهُ. So if you see something which you have never experienced or seen in your life, you're going to think, what's this? Okay? And I've seen this with so many people, subhanAllah. Like, whenever my mother, for example, may Allah bless her, she sees, obviously she's from the older generation, so she's just used to, the rice and the curries. And so anything that falls outside of this is practically not considered food, okay? So if she sees a pizza or a kebab, for example, she'll be like, what's this? She's never really eaten. I don't think she's even eaten I don't think I've ever seen her eat a pizza or a kebab in my life, okay? Doner kebab. So, she's not used to it. So naturally, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it tastes like. But if you see something that you're used to seeing, so you like eating fish, for example, and you see you'll see another fish, it looks different. But it's a fish. You think, I'm going to give that a go. Okay, because I like fish. Okay? So he says, Al-insan bil-ma'luf anas wa ila al-ma'hudi amyal. He's more inclined to what he's used to eating. So if he sees something which he's not accustomed to, he'll naturally sort of be averse to it. ثم إذا ظفر بشيء من جنس ما سلف له من عهد ثم وجده أشرف مما ألفه أولا عظم ابتهاجه وفرحه به. وفرحه به. And then, if he now gets hold of something which he has some familiarity with before, but then he sees it in a state which is far greater than what he is accustomed to, he will be amazed with it. He will be amazed with it. And he will really want it. So for example, you like eating, chicken, for example, in this life. Okay? And we've all seen, chicken generally in this life and the different types of chicken. But then you see chicken, subhanAllah, in the afterlife. And you see it on another level, subhanAllah. Huge, soft, tender chicken. Okay? In a way that you've never seen it before. But the key thing is, you've experienced something like it in this dunya. So are you going to want it? Absolutely you're going to want it. So the fact that Allah mentions that the people in Jannah will say this, it's in order to entice them and in order to make them realize that they are really going to enjoy this Jannah. They are really going to enjoy it. And then he goes on to say, فَأَهْلُ الْجَنَّةِ إِذَا بَصَرُوا الرُّمَّانَ فِي الدُّنْيَا ثُمَّ أَبْصَرُوهَا فِي الْآخِرَةِ وَوَجَدُوا الرُّمَّانَةَ الْجَنَّةِ أَطْيَبُ وَأَشْرَفُ مِنْ رُمَّانَةِ الدُّنْيَا كَانَ فَرَحُهُمْ بِهَا أَشَدْ مِنْ. Okay, this is something similar to what we said already. Now, I wanted to reflect upon a point here, which is the fact that the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this shows you subhanAllah, how much Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to yearn for this paradise. To the extent that Allah is speaking not just about what is in paradise, but how people will respond when they are in paradise. So, the level of empathy here and the level of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to yearn for paradise, we can see that very clearly in the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has described this paradise here. Ibn al-Jawzi as well, he also spoke about what is the significance of mentioning this mutashabih, that the fact that they will be given something which is similar to what they were given in the dunya. فالجواب أن إذا قلنا إنه متشابه المنظر مختلف الطعام, that if we say that they resemble the fruit or the food in appearance, but it differs in taste, كان أغرب عند الخلق أحسن, then it will appear more interesting to the person who's going to eat it. Okay, and he'll be more keen to have it. Imagine, for example, we all like banana, or say, for example, an apple. We all generally know the taste of an apple. They all vary. We have different types, the Granny Smiths, and different types of apple. But imagine a new apple came, and it's got a completely unique and different taste. Okay, are you going to be keen to eat it if you're an apple lover? You're going to want to try it. It's like when they come out, when we have chocolates. Okay, a new flavor comes out from your favorite company. Okay, you're going to want to try it. Okay, you've tasted something similar to it, but now it's got a new taste to it, and you're going to want to have it. فإنك لو رأيت تفاحة فيها طعم سائر الفاكهة كان نهاية في العجب. So this really shows you the extent of our pleasure in paradise, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will vary the delights in paradise, and we will not get bored. We will not get bored of the delights in paradise. Now, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, so we've spoken about now the rivers in paradise, the trees, which is one type of delight of environment. And then we move on now to we spoke about the food, which is another type of delight. The third type of delight Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَلَهُمْ فِيهَا أَزْوَاجٌ مُطَهَّرَةٌ, and they will have pure spouses. A third type of delight. Now, At-Tabari, the word here, azwaj. At-Tabari, he mentions azwaj is a plural of the word zawj. And zawj, traditionally in the Arabic language, it really referred to imra'atul rajul, so a man's wife, essentially. Later on, it was feminized into zawja. But originally, zawj meant a wife, and vice versa. So you can say it was genderless in the sense that it was so it applied to both genders. And it was very rare for the Arabs to use the word zawja with a ta marbuta at the end. Okay, so here azwaj is a plural of zawj, although it's masculine in its wording. Okay, is in reference to wives. And so they will have pure wives. Now, where is the imtinan, or where is the delight in that? And we obviously know how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything in pairs. وَمِن كُلِّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقْنَا زَوْجَيْنِ, that we created everything in pairs. And one of the wisdoms behind that is to show how each thing or each pair is essentially dependent upon one another. So Allah has created men and women. He's created night and day, land and sea, light and darkness. Everything is created in pairs. Whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-wahid. He's one. La sharika lah. He has no partner. Inna Allaha witrun yuhibbul witra. Allah He's odd in the sense that He's one in number, and He loves the odd. Whereas things which are in pairs, we become dependent upon them. So the fact that we will have partners in paradise indicates that this need that we have will be satisfied. You'll be satisfied. But these partners, they will be mutahhara. They will be purified and not just pure. This is why if it was correct, Al-Razi, he mentions, why did Allah mentions mutahhara and not tahira? Tahira means pure. Mutahhara means they've gone for a process of purification. What's the significance there? He says this is in order to indicate that they have been purified by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These partners will be purified by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which obviously adds to the value of these spouses and partners. But in what sense have they been purified? This is the question. In what sense have they been purified? I generally found that most of the earlier scholars of Tafsīr, they mentioned certain things that the early scholars mentioned, certain things which conveyed the meaning of purified. And they generally spoke about it from a physical perspective. They are pure from a physical perspective. Pure in the sense that they are pure, in the sense that they will not menstruate. They will not menstruate. So they will have no blood. Other physical impurities, urine, feces, and sweat, and all of these things, they will be free from all of that because they've been purified by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many scholars mentioned this from the early generations. I found amongst the later scholars of Tafsīr, they went beyond that. And he said it doesn't mean that they're physically purified, but they're purified in terms of character as well. وَفِي الْخُلُقِ, as Ibn Jawzi said, فإنهن لا يحسدن ولا يغرن ولا ينظرن إلى غير أزواجهن. So they will be pure in the sense that they will not be envious. They will not have jealousy. They will not have jealousy. Because a man in paradise will have a number of wives. So a woman might think, well, she might get jealous. No, she will not get jealous. They have been purified from that. They've been purified from envy as well. And they will not look to anyone other than their own spouse. Their eyes will just focus on their own husbands and their own partners, and they will not look at anybody else. So therefore, subhanallah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the women in paradise, it's not just from the physical perspective. Now many people, they belittle the way Muslims speak about the women in paradise, as if we view them as being some sort of sexual object. And it's very strange coming from this society that has sexualized women so much and treat them as, essentially sex objects. But in Islam, we look at women from a completely different perspective, and even the enjoyment that we have in paradise, it's beyond just the gratification of sensual pleasures. It's everything that is associated with having a partner. So in terms of the refinement of character, being in the company who has that refined character. Khuluq, no envy. Pure mahabba, pure love. And that's the enjoyment that we will have in paradise. Now just to reiterate this point of the purity of the spouses in paradise, it's not just of the physical nature. Ibn Juzay, he mentions that also, he says, يحتمل أن يريد طهارة الطيب والطيب الأخلاق. So they will be purified in fragrance and in manners as well. Ibn Qayyim also, he mentioned this in detail as well. He says, وَكُلُّ أَذَى يَكُمْ مِن نِسَاءِ الدُّنْيَا فَطَهَّرَ مَعَ ذَلِكَ بَاطِنَهَا مِنَ الْأَخْلَاقِ السَّيِّئَةِ. So in all of the harmful things that people have in this dunya, that will be removed. But in addition to that, the inward states will be purified as well. وَالصِّفَاتِ الْمَذْمُومَةِ, bad characteristics. وَطَهَّرَ لِسَانَهَا مِنَ الْفُحْشِ وَالْبَذَاءِ. Allah will purify her tongue from foul speech. and that her eyesight do not fall on anyone other than her husband, and also her clothing as well. Now, I just want to focus on a couple of points here before we move on. Islam does not deny the nature of man. Does not deny the nature of man. This is an important point. We all acknowledge that human beings have been created with a certain needs, certain desires that need to be fulfilled. To deny that is to deny the very nature of man. So Islam, we have to be careful of going to these, again, two extremes. Where essentially we take this, for example, one extreme, which is maybe the archaic sort of Christian way of looking at, sensual pleasures. They considered, for example, one of the 7 deadly sins. What are one of the 7 deadly sins that are related to this? Lust. Okay? So any form of inclination towards our sort of carnal instincts, that is lust and that is looked down upon. To the extent that you find many Christians even view the process of relations with one spouse, that the sole reason behind it is for procreation, to have children. In Islam, we don't view it like that. It's not just for procreation. It's for enjoyment as well. We can't deny that aspect. We can't deny that aspect of man. But at the same time, subhanAllah, the other extreme as well, which is what we see in society today. And it really baffles me, subhanAllah, when for example, when people criticize, people that, for example, they want to go and, 72 versions of paradise, and, he went to jihad for this reason, to attain 72, and they sort of mock it. I mean, there's many ways we can respond to that, but I'm thinking this is really strange coming from a society which treats women in the way that they do. It's really strange. Really, really strange. Whereas we honor our women, okay, and they treat their women as they do, okay, and then they have the audacity to criticize someone who wants to have a pure wife or pure wives. Very, very strange. And not only that, look at this, brothers. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about paradise, generally in the Quran, is it usually the women of paradise that Allah speaks about first? Or what is it? Look in this ayah. Remember I mentioned the order of the things that I mentioned. The first thing that Allah usually describes paradise with is what? It's scenery. Jannatin tajri min tahtiha al-anhar. That's the scenery. Beauty of vision, the environment. And then after that, Allah many times speaks about what? The food. And then comes our other sensual desires. So that's why it's important we develop a holistic view of paradise and not just take a snippet, what this, the Western media is famous for doing, okay, just taking snippets from what Muslims believe and not look at things from a holistic perspective. That's how we view Jannah. We view Jannah from that holistic perspective. And that's why if you look, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in this short description of paradise, He's spoken about the environment, the food, and our own, internal sort of instincts that we have. That is the peak of enjoyment, subhanAllah. The peak of enjoyment and pleasure. Now, another important question that I'm sure many sisters will have, which is, why is it that in the Quran Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala focuses so much on the women of paradise and there's nothing explicitly mentioned about the rewards for women? Okay? Now, and you find maybe sometimes women, they get upset when even women are mentioned like that within the Quran. Well, firstly, let's remember, take all of this into context. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has spoken about the homes of paradise. He's spoken about the food of paradise. Okay? The scenery. And these are the things women usually love, isn't it? Okay? A home, a nice home. Okay? Food. Okay? They are the ones that prepare it at the end of the day. Okay? You know, they like these things. These things are mentioned as well. It's strange, though, that as soon as the wives of paradise are mentioned, it's as if that's the only thing that's been described about paradise. When I've mentioned already, it's the other things that have been focused on more in the Quran when it comes to paradise. That's one thing. Secondly, there's a real problem here. A real problem here. That problem is that whenever a particular reward has been mentioned for men, it's as if some women might feel left out. Because men have something, women should have something equivalent to it as well. So a common question is, well, if men can have so many wives in paradise, can women have that amount of husbands in paradise? Not just can, but shouldn't they as well? Okay? Why do people think like that? Why do certain women think like this? Men and women are very different. Okay? Allah has given them so much in paradise. You will have whatever you desire. You will have whatever you desire. That doesn't necessarily mean, okay, don't think that therefore that means that you have to have what a man has. And the strange thing is, one thing that amazes me in this society, there's this push that, women have the right to work. Okay, I'm not going to say it's right or wrong. I'm not going to say that now. This is not the time to discuss this in detail. But to me, it's become, it's not just a matter of having the right to work, but it's a matter of being like a man. If a man has a right to that, then I should be like him in that. It's ajib, because Allah has preferred women in Islam by not giving them that position. Okay? In fact, what's the point of working? What's the whole point of working? Is it just to, enjoy yourself at work? No, the whole point of work is that you make money to provide for your family. It's a difficult thing to do. Allah has put that burden on men. And He has freed women from that responsibility. Allah has honored women from that perspective. It's binding upon the husband to provide for the woman. Binding upon the husband to provide for the woman. And if he doesn't, a woman could potentially nullify the marriage. Why would a woman therefore say, no, I want that, I want to be put in the same position, of a man? Ajib, very, very strange. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, okay, men will have spouses in paradise, a woman shouldn't start thinking, well, I want the same as well. No, Allah has honored you in different ways. You will have your beautiful homes, you will have your palaces. Understand that men and women have been created with different instincts and desires, and so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of that, and therefore addresses mankind in the Quran, taking that into consideration. Also, remember that a woman by her fitrah is someone who is someone who will be more shy about discussing maybe these sensual matters. Okay, the gratification of our sensual desires. That's if their fitrah is sound. Okay, and they generally have sound tarbiyah. Obviously, in this day and age, it's the way people discuss these matters very openly. Maybe it's due to a bad tarbiyah. Okay. So naturally, when these topics are maybe mentioned in, say, gatherings, women tend to be a bit more shy, isn't it? But when you get a group of brothers together and they discuss these issues, it's very different, isn't it? Okay? They'll be very explicit in terms of the things that they like, maybe. Okay? When it comes to these issues. Women won't be. They tend to have more shyness. And so the Quran, when it speaks about these matters, these sensitivities are observed. Okay? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, so, وَهُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ, and they will reside therein for eternity. وَهُمْ فِيهَا, and they will be in the paradises, خَالِدُونَ. Now, khalidun, for a long time. Now, khulud, the word is the gerund or the verbal noun khulud, usually is used in the Arabic language to refer to a long period of time. A long period of time. As the Arabs would make a dua, they used to say, خَلَّدَ اللَّهُ مُلْكَهُ خَلَّدَ اللَّهُ مُلْكَهُ. May Allah prolong and lengthen His reign in authority. But it can be used to refer to al-abadiyya al-haqiqa. Yani it can be used to refer to eternal life as well. So خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أَبَدًا. So the abada is to re-emphasize. And that's why we say life in paradise is eternal. Now, Ibn Kathir, he mentions a good point, an interesting point here. He says, هَذَا هُوَ تَمَامُ السَّعَادَةِ. This is the peak and the uttermost part of happiness and pleasure. Why? فإنهم مع هذا النعيم في مقام أمين من الموت والانقطاع فلا آخر له ولا انقضاء بل في نعيم سرمدي أبدي على الدوام. So we've spoken about the different types of pleasures in paradise in terms of from our environment and scenery, the food, our sensual pleasures. One of the things is when you enjoy yourself, you fear that you might eventually, that enjoyment will come to an end. So to reassure the believers that this is an enjoyment that will not end. And that's one of the unique features of enjoyment in this life. As Ibn Qayyim used to mention, that enjoyment in this life is usually very temporal and it's usually followed by pain. Okay? Look, for example, the foods, the delicious foods that we eat. Very enjoyable. Once you eat your meal, that's it. Once you eat your meal, that's it. You don't taste the food anymore. And if you eat too much, and it's ajib, subhanAllah, how the most delicious foods that Allah has created, it's usually the most harmful as well. Subhanallah. Really, just to show you that, look, you can enjoy yourself, but this is dunya. There's always something in the dunya that Allah has created. No matter how good it is, there's an aspect to it that will make, reality hit home. Okay? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that the nature of the delights in paradise, it's eternal, never ever ending. Al-Razi, he says, اعلم أن مجامع اللذات إما المسكن أو الطعام أو المنكح. He says that all of the forms of delight in this existence are usually, in terms of the physical delights, are usually related to maskan, our home, mat'am, our food, and mankah, our sensual pleasures. فَوَصَفَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى الْمَسْكَنِ بِقَوْلِهِ. So Allah, He described the maskan, our homes in paradise. We were saying جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارِ. As for the ta'am, the food, كُلَّمَا رُزِقُوا مِنْهَا مِنْ ثَمَرَةٍ رِزْقًا قَالُوا هَذَا الَّذِي رُزِقُنَا مِنْ قَبْلِ. And when it comes to our sensual pleasures, Allah described paradise as being, or وَلَهُمْ فِيهَا أَزْوَاجٌ مُطَهَّرَةٌ. And then He says, ثُمَّ إِنَّ هَذِي الْأَشْيَاءِ إِذَا حَصَلَتْ وَقَارَنَهَا خَوْفُ الزَّوَالِ كانت تنعم منغصا. That even if you attain all of these things, but if there is a fear of that these delights can be removed, then this enjoyment will be disturbed. It will be a disturbed form of enjoyment. It will be spoiled. Okay? And that's one, subhanAllah, Ibn Qayyim, this reminds me of a statement of Ibn Qayyim when he said that when a person becomes so attached to something, really loves something very strongly, it can punish him in a number of ways. And one of the ways that he mentions is that the thing that you enjoy and love so much, if you develop such a strong love for it, you will develop a fear for losing that thing that you love so much. And that's why people who are engrossed into the worldly life, they suffer from anxiety. Millionaires, for example, they love their wealth, but they also suffer from that fear and anxiety of what could happen to their wealth. So it destroys them, subhanAllah. And so here he mentions Al-Razi that So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clarified, فَبَيَّنَ تَعَالَى أَنَّ هَذَا الْخَوْفِ زَائِلٌ عَنْهُم. This fear that they might have, that, this pleasure will eventually stop, Allah has removed that fear. وَهُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. فَصَارَتِ الْآيَةِ دَالَّةً عَلَى كَمَالِ التَّنَعُّمِ وَالسُّرُورِ. So we can see from this ayah the perfection of the enjoyment and the pleasure and happiness that people will have in paradise. And so we see, just to maybe add just a couple more points, a few final remarks inshallah, that the na'im in Jannah, the pleasure in paradise, is not just of a carnal nature, carnal desires. It's more encompassing, and it seeks to satisfy all of the you can say the points in which we become happy in life. So as I said, from the environment, from where we live, to the food that we eat. And subhanAllah, another point that we can add is that when we reflect upon the reward of the believers in paradise, we will see that the reward in paradise is far greater than our actual deeds. And when you think of the delights in paradise, and then you look to your own deeds, and you really ask yourself and think to yourself, subhanAllah, are my good deeds really worth all of this in paradise? And you will realize no. But then that's the same for all believers. So the fact is, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us, insha'Allah, something which would be far more valuable and greater in worth than our deeds. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He speaks about the rewards in paradise, it's an ata. It's a gift to the believers. But whereas when a person is punished in hellfire, it's a jaza, it's a recompense. So what we receive in paradise is just going to be beyond our imaginations. مَا لَا عَيْنٌ رَأَتْ. It's beyond what the eyes have seen, what the ears have ever heard, and what the heart has ever thought about. It's just beyond our comprehension. So that's the description of some of the descriptions of paradise. I think it's important that we, just to have a very, very quick recap, that try to remember the position of this ayah in relation to the previous ayah, and we spoke about the importance of developing that balance between putting fear in our hearts and giving hope as well. And also this act of tabsīr, of giving glad tidings, we spoke about that. We also spoke about this phrase that the people of paradise, they will receive food and provisions that they had experienced to a certain degree in this worldly life. And then we spoke about the significance of mentioning that. And we spent some time on that. Then we spoke about the different levels of enjoyment Allah mentioned in the Quran. In this ayah, from our homes to our food to our sensual pleasures. And we spoke about how comprehensive that is, and therefore we should try to develop a comprehensive understanding of the delights in paradise, and not just take snippets from the delights in paradise, and the mistake that many people make. Also, we spoke about maybe certain questions maybe some sisters might ask in regards to the spouses in paradise, and this issue of eternity, spending life in eternity in paradise as well. We spoke about that. I was going to start on the next ayah, but I think that will actually, we've run out of time. So we'll stop on that point, inshallah. Subhanaka wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.